Today's lesson in writing haiku, final lesson of the week, is about the comparison that is contained within all haiku. So when you write your own haiku, in addition to including things like kigo and koreji, which we've talked about in the past, you'll also want to try to write into your haiku a comparison. And when you're reading haiku, you're going to look for comparisons because it's in those comparisons that we derive or we create much of the meaning of the poem. So let's quickly review. First, what we've learned. Haiku are very short poems about nature. We've also learned that the 5-7 5-syllable rule really should get thrown out. In English, if you can say it in one breath, that's short enough. The third thing we've learned, haiku contain kigo. Kigo is a season word. So we want to indicate what season it is, and it can be any kind of word that makes us all think of the same season. Haiku contain koreji. A koreji is a cut word. In our English language, really those cut words that are we find in Japanese haiku are actually more like punctuation marks in English haiku. Colons and semicolons, hyphens, dashes, ellipses, commas, things like that. Today's lesson. The meaning from haiku comes from comparisons contained in the haiku. So let's take a look at an example. The same example we've been looking at all week. This is a great, great haiku, full of things to learn. So let's read it together. On a barren branch, a raven has perched. Autumn dusk. So I'll give you a second. Can you pause the video and think about what two things or more are being compared in this poem? All right, you come up with anything? Well, one comparison is the raven and how the raven has come to settle on a branch. A dark raven on a branch with no leaves because it's autumn. Just as darkness is settling on the world. So we can see the dusk and the raven as sort of two things, and maybe there's a metaphor there, a comparison, right, between the raven settling on the branch and dusk settling over the world. They're both dark. They both make us feel certain ways, potentially. Dusk is large, the raven is small. Dusk is all around us, the raven is a single point. Dusk happens all the time. Watching a raven perch on a barren branch might only happen once in a very long while. And so we'd ask ourselves as readers, what kind of meaning can we get out of that comparison of the raven settling on the branch as dusk settles on the night? Well, maybe me as a reader, I could create meaning that both are part of nature, part of the natural world, and that we're lucky to experience both. Maybe that both happen without human intervention, and that while we like to think we're in control of the world, both things like where a raven chooses to perch and whether or not the earth rotates and creates dusk and dawn and night and day, that's not up to us. We don't have nearly as much control as humans as we like to think we have, and so much of the natural world just happens with or without us. And maybe from that we can then continue our train of thought into, okay, well, if that's true, if the natural world goes on without us, maybe we need to rethink our perspective. Maybe I need to rethink my perspective about my place in the natural world. That's just one example. Every single person who reads this poem might create their own meaning, but that meaning comes from comparing two things. And a well-written poem, a well-written haiku is going to have more than two things to compare. I happen to compare the raven settling on the branch to dusk settling on the night. But what if we compared the raven to autumn? There's a whole other set of comparisons, another set of meanings and trains of thought that we could take if we compared those two things. Or what if we compared autumn to dusk? How dusk settles on the world as autumn does as well. Those two things could be compared. Or how about raven to the branch? A barren branch and a raven. Is there a comparison there that we could make and derive or get some meaning? So this is really complicated stuff. And if it's not really quite making sense, that's okay. Haiku, seemingly simple, short poems about nature at first, are actually incredibly complex, both to write and to read. And in fact, people who are fans of haiku, the pleasure they get from reading and writing haiku come from their complexity, come from the meaning you can make with so few words. And as a writer, can I find in nature those comparisons and say them so beautifully in so few words that I will lead others to similar trains of thought that I had, to similar ideas that I had, almost like puzzles. So let's look at one more example. This is my own personal favorite haiku. Here we go. The stillness of dawn, crashing between the branches, a solitary leaf. Think about what the comparisons are in this poem. Go ahead and pause the video and think it out for a minute or two. All right, have you thought about what kind of comparisons we could make here? Well, for me personally, the first comparison that really stands out, and the reason I love this poem so much, is the stillness and the crashing. And these aren't things at all, these are actions. The stillness of dawn. I can feel the stillness of dawn. I know what that peaceful, quiet, serene feeling is. And then all of a sudden, crashing. The idea that I can see that leaf, that one solitary leaf. Solitary means one or by itself, falling between the branches of a tree. Everything else is quiet. Nothing else is moving at dawn except for this one leaf. And so from there, I have a million ideas that pop into my head all at once, comparisons of the tiny little leaf and the stillness that surrounds everything, of the motion of the leaf and how it's just moving the way nature moves it, right? The way the air happens to move it, and the stillness of nothing moving, of everything being still. Dawn, how everything is together at dawn. Everything's waking up together at dawn. Flowers are opening, birds are coming alive again. Everybody seems to be working together to wake up for the day at dawn, right? Waking up, but the solitary leaf is falling down. It's coming to earth to settle forever. So it's like the beginning of one thing, but the end of another. Boy, there's so many different comparisons in this poem. I just love it so much. So what meaning can I make? Well, maybe that no matter how hard, my first thought is, and this is just one possibility, no matter how hard I try to be serene and be peaceful and try to find calmness in the world, especially in this time, in this day and age, things are going to happen that are out of my control, like a leaf falling from a tree to interrupt my calmness. And I have to be okay with that. I have to be ready for it, expect it, and find beauty in it if I can. That's just one idea. But do you see how in a haiku there are comparisons, and then from these comparisons you can, if you think and sit with a haiku, you can make meaning out of it. That is the beauty of haiku. That is the heart of haiku. That is why people who love to read and write haiku love to read and write haiku, because of the meaning you can make from the comparisons that all quality haiku contain. So I encourage you, as writers today and going forward, try to contain in your haiku two things that could be compared: near and far, small and large, everywhereness in a single point, dark and light, high and low, sight and smell, color and non-color, black and white, anything. Anything you can think of. It's an infinite amount of possibilities, right? And as a reader, I challenge you to do this. Okay? This is like a separate little mini lesson inside the mini lesson. As a reader, pick a haiku you love, one that you've written, or maybe one of these that you've read, and memorize it. It won't take long. Memorize it. And as you're falling asleep, say that haiku to yourself 10 times and let yourself think about it as you drift off to sleep. I can almost promise you're going to think of something you hadn't thought of before. That is one of the earliest reading strategies taught to me about how to read haiku is to memorize a single haiku and then say it over and over to yourself, especially as you're falling asleep. Try it. All right. But as writers, try to contain that comparison that is an all quality haiku, that comparison. Okay? Because it's there that make your haiku so interesting. And it's there that your readers are going to find meaning in your haiku. All right. I can't wait to read what you've written. You're going to share it with me today. Look for directions in the writing section of our Google Classroom.